I'm going to go straight into introducing the first speaker, a light dragoon, recently left the army, who's had an interesting exploit across the ocean, James Kayll.
Thanks, Paul. Good evening, generals, colonels, sirs, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to speak again at the evening of Endeavour. Last time I spoke about rowing across the Indian Ocean. Sadly, not much change, and we're going across the Atlantic tonight. People always ask me why. Why do you row across oceans? And as I said last time, and I'm going to say again, there are three main reasons. Firstly, I like to get a tan. Secondly, I like my hair to go blonde, not ginger. And thirdly, I like to lose weight. Well, my tan faded, my hair fell out, and despite losing a stone and a half, my weight loss was somewhat short-lived and returned with interest. So tonight my intent is to cover the following: a quick introduction to my inspirational crew. I'm going to talk briefly about the boat. We'll then go to La Gomera, which is where we started our crossing. We'll then talk about the crossing and then finish in Antigua, a distance of 3,000 miles, which was completed earlier this year. A fully military crew, as you can see, 2 able-bodied and 2 military amputees. I was joined from left to right, as you look at it, by Lance Corporal Kayll Royce from the Light Dragoons, Captain Mark Jenkins from the Royal Army Medical Corps, Mark's Army Physio, and Corporal Scott Blaney from the Grenadier Guards. But this trip wasn't about me, and it wasn't about Mark. This trip was about Scott and Kayll, pictured here during their sea survival training in Devon. Kayll grew up in South Africa. A keen outdoorsman, he loved the ocean, and he loved to sail. In fact, he and I had sailed together a lot. In April 2012, the Light Dragoons redeployed to Afghanistan for what was their 4th tour. On the 2nd of May, Kayll initiated an improvised explosive device. The resulting explosion caused immediate amputation of both of his legs above both of his knees. Multiple amputations to all of the fingers on his left hand. The loss of his right bicep, a dislocated shoulder, burst lungs and a bruised heart, broken neck and broken jaw, and severe facial damage. Kayll was repatriated to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham, where he spent 48 days in a coma. Ironically, the same number of days that it was going to take him to row across the Atlantic. Kayll died 3 times, and once he had awoken, I went to visit him. It was here in Birmingham that I made him a promise, and I promised that I'd get him back to sea. To this day, he still thinks that should have been on a 100-foot yacht with plasma screens, a large crew, and a lot of champagne. But alas, as an impoverished army officer, all I could offer was a rowing boat. Scott joined the Grenadier Guards, and in 2007, Scott went back to Afghanistan for his 2nd tour. On the 28th of May 2007, Scott's section came under small arms fire and took cover behind a built-up natural defence. In doing so, they initiated another improvised explosive device. The explosion instantly killed one of Scott's best friends, and the damage to his right leg was beyond repair. It was amputated above the right knee. His right arm was also seriously damaged. However, since injury, Scott's completed 2 marathons, and he swam across the channel. Ironically, the only nautical experience that Scott had prior to our crossing was that of the ferry journey back from France. However, it was still a baptism of fire for him for the first couple of weeks, but soon he became a strong rower and quickly found his sense of humour, as I hope you can see. Our boat, aptly named Endeavour, pretty standard ocean rowing boat, 29 feet long, made of glass fibre. You can see that there is a small cabin at the bow, a small cabin at the stern, and 2 rowing positions in the middle. So that meant that we'd always row as a pair, whilst 2 people were resting either end. Rowing in shifts of 2 hours on, and then at night, 1 hour on, 1 3-hour session on, and 1 3-hour session off. If you look at the back of the boat, you can see that it's covered with solar panels. There's also one at the bow. So we're completely reliant on solar energy. And the solar power will charge our batteries, which then in turn will run our water maker, GPS, automatic identification systems, VHF, sat phone, computer, charge iPods, speakers, and cameras. So down to La Gomera. The race start was actually delayed by 2 days due to bad weather. There was torrential rain, a lot of local flooding, and more importantly, a strong southerly breeze in the Canary Islands, which meant that we couldn't actually row away from them. It would have been dangerous to start. However, on the 4th of December, crew by crew, we left the dock and made our way out towards the start line. On the start line, there were 16 rowing boats, 5 of which were never going to make it to Antigua. 2 crews were airlifted to safety within the first week, and a further 3 crews were rescued by container ships during their crossings, one of which was rescued after 96 days. Within 4 days, we hit a strong southwesterly. This meant we could make no progress south and no progress west, so we're pretty stuck. The only safe option in this circumstance is to deploy the power anchor. The power anchor to an ocean rower it's a survival tool. It's a subsurface parachute that's deployed between 70 and 100 meters ahead of the boat, usually 2 wavelengths ahead of you. And it slows the rate of drift backwards with the wind. And it also keeps the bow head to wind, so effectively there's less chance that you'll get rolled by waves hitting you on the beam. We spent 2.5 days waiting for the southwesterly to back, and eventually it went round into the east and then into the northeast, and we started to make some progress. And after a few days of good progress, the conditions changed. Sustained 30 and 40 knot gales created waves of epic magnitude. With something like 50,000 miles experience myself, I can honestly say that these were the largest waves I've ever seen. 60 to 70 feet with breaking crests. Made it fairly treacherous and also terrifying. The biggest problem was keeping the stern of the boat perpendicular to the following seas, because if it wasn't, then there was a danger you'd be rolled. So therefore, we couldn't use the steering systems because they can't predict the wave angle. That meant that only one person could row, the person in the bow, and the person at the stern would then steer with 2 lines, so going straight back to the rudder. Pretty archaic, but it was the only way to do it. During the day, it was manageable, but at night, it was a complete lottery. And on the evening of the 15th of December, I had a fairly bad feeling. Something wasn't right. We'd been living on the edge for days. I phoned home, and I also phoned the weather router. Outside, I couldn't see the difference between I couldn't see the interface between sky and water. There was no moon, completely overcast, no stars, no ambient light. The first warning of a wave would be the roar. The second would be the tumbling white water above you like the jaws of hell opening up to engulf you. At midnight, Kayll and I took over on deck. Kayll was rowing, and I was steering. At 16 minutes past midnight, I'd lined up another wave, slightly higher than the top of the auditorium. As we went up the face of the wave, another wave came from our north starboard side and hit the boat and beam. It rolled us instantly. I was plucked from my seat and I was flung over Kayll's head straight into the Atlantic. As the boat rolled, Kayll didn't know if the Velcro straps holding his stumps to his seat were going to hold him in place or he was going to be able to escape. He thought he might drown. You'll be familiar, I think, with the moment on the beach when you're swimming in surf and you lose control of your body. You don't know which way is up, which way is down. You lose your breath and you may start to panic. Like that, we were dragged down the face of this wave. As we got to the trough, we found the surface. I shouted for Kayll, and I saw Kayll, and together we pulled ourselves back onto the boat. The next most important thing was to get control of the boat and point it in a safe direction. We're now beam 2 following seas. It's dangerous. So I searched the steering lines, which I found. I shouted for Mark and for Scott. Clearly had a fairly heavy landing inside the cabins. Once the boat was pointing in a safe direction, Kayll and I started to survey the damage. And to be perfectly honest, only one oar had snapped and we'd lost a few bits of kit. It was at this stage that I thought there were probably about 151 other places I'd rather be. But it's then that I realised that the situation was actually more positive than negative, because up until that point we'd been living on the edge. been living in fear and anticipation of the unknown of the rolling, when, how, what was going to happen, how were we going to react. But actually, the boat had self-righted. People hadn't been hurt. Our kit and equipment had done the right job. The electrics were still working. The cabins hadn't leaked. And that gave us confidence. It gave us confidence in ourselves, our kit, and indeed the boat, and enough confidence to do it again if we had to. Fortunately, we weren't rolled again, but the conditions remained fairly unpleasant all the way across. However, we eventually managed to adopt routine and even shared the occasional tea or coffee, did some washing, celebrated Christmas with tinned fruit and the giving of gifts. I gave Scott some everlasting gobstoppers and toilet roll. Kayll got some juggling balls. And we all had some delicious pussy. That's the energy drink, sorry. Injuries are fairly common on board, and the first thing you'll get is blistering to your hands. There's not much you can do to avoid it. All you can do is tape them up, wear gloves, and eventually your skin will harden and form calluses. Chafing around the foot straps is fairly common, and there's a nasty example there. I had a muscular injury on board, so I thought that the best thing to do was to employ the physio to do some acupuncture, and I'm sure that's the first example of acupuncture on a rowing boat. But the most important part of your body, and I know you know what's coming, it is vital to adopt routine and have the discipline to administrate yourself every time you finish a shift. You have to wipe yourself with baby wipes, clean the sweat, clean the salt. Otherwise, you will develop boils and spots and chafing and rash and every other thing like that in unpleasant areas of your body. And here are two crew members who can remain nameless. And the truth is that actually that's not too bad. And the next slide I'm going to show you is that of a fellow competitor who, in my opinion, clearly got it wrong. There is no excuse for not taking enough baby wipes, and you never know how you could employ them. And so, ladies and gentlemen, after 48 days, 9 hours and 11 minutes, we eventually crossed the finishing line to the south of Antigua. Considering we're minus 3 legs and a hand to come second in our class and third overall from the 16 rowing boats, I thought was a great achievement. We naturally celebrated with flares and continued to waste more flares as we rowed into English Harbour, greeted by the horns of super yachts, the cannons from the classics, the Antiguan Defence Force, Rastafarians, friends, family, media. The feeling of excitement, completion, pride was all overwhelming. We even got a chance to waste some champagne, which was great. But one of the best things that happened on our arrival was the regiment sent out two soldiers, two friends of Kayll's. As you look at it on the left, Sergeant Short was the man that saved Kayll's life in Afghanistan, and he was there to welcome him on the dock in Antigua. All that's left for me to say now is that I apologise that Scott and Kayll can't be here, and I apologise for being a fraud, because this was not my endeavour, it was theirs. Thank you.